I'm looking at an ABC 7 Chicago article from November 14. Oh, the Carter Page stuff, or?
25 seconds.
Lovely. And we have another caller on the line. Do we still have somebody?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We have 4 callers.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn pus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back. We have a bunch of callers, so I want to dive in and get those right away because there's obviously a ton to talk about in what's going on this week. But I want to be abundantly clear that there is no way that John Kelly and the White House didn't know about these allegations about Rob Porter unless they are incredibly bad at their job. And the other thing is, there's no way that the tweet that the president put out about Rob Portman was not written by Dan Scavino. Just for the record, the use of the word "whereupon" is a big tell. I just don't buy it. So we'll be we'll be getting to some of the other stories around that in a second. But I want to get to the callers. So who do we have there, Lady B?
We have Robert from Florida.
Cool. Hey, Robert.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello, America. How is everybody? All right.
We're great. Thank you for asking.
Why do I feel? Why do I feel this parade 10 minutes after it starts? He don't fire Mueller. That way, he's already got the army around D.C. surrounding him to protect his aid. Huh?
Right.
And the other thing is, if he's going to have a parade, it's upon every one of us Americans to go in Animal House's parade. I'll drive the marbles up there. We need some people there, right across the banner and destroy the floats and all that stuff. Cause havoc.
Right.
I mean,
well,
this is his ego stroke. Why are we stroking it? And we should point out other famous parades. Sadat had a military parade. Look what happened there, Danny. You want one of those? I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just saying this is what happens at parades.
Right.
George Bush had the first one, the good one, had 41. He had a parade and he lost re-election. So. Right. You got to remind him of these things,
Yeah, I don't disagree.
He's like a couple pills on his jacket. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say, there's a lot that concerns me about having a parade. Not the least of which is, I go through all these things that Trump's been doing, and I go, how much would Putin like what he's doing? It's pretty easy. If you just go through, I think undermining our intelligence gathering and our rule of law in the country, that would definitely help him. Setting Americans against each other, sowing racial discord, and getting literally the sexes to fight each other, men against women. Like, this all helps Putin in the undermining of democracy. And then I was like, and then what would be your final mark in a movie if this was the case and you had a giant Manchurian candidate? I think gathering all your military leaders in one easy target would help, along with most of your biggest munitions. Let's just have a big parade where everybody's in town at the same time. That's like, how much more of a 9/11 do you want to set up? That's the part that makes me crazy about this, because it's not like he doesn't read his daily brief either. So that was the problem we had with 9/11. Yeah, that part makes me nuts, and it goes in the conspiracy zone. So go ahead.
He wants to be. He's sunglasses and a funny hat away from being Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, even Saddam, when they started, they didn't have the medals on their shoulders, on the lapels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a little act that they play, and we shouldn't let this. We should, 80% of America don't want this, maybe even more. So we should not let it happen.
Yeah.
Here's how you defeat Trump, and this is going to sound sadistic. You kill Putin. You really got to kill him. I mean, because he's killing democracy everywhere. He is our enemy. And he's
For the
gotta go.
record, the House Sparks Radio
and
program
he's-
does not condone the assassination of foreign leaders legally. But I understand what you mean. See, I don't know if I believe that, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why that doesn't work for me. Because when you cut puppet strings, the puppet isn't free; it falls down like a lump. So I don't know that it makes him any better. It just cuts him loose. The thing to do if you're really going to do it, if you're really thinking in terms of huge abstracts, is that the UN basically takes Putin for war crimes that he's committed and manipulation of elections within his country and the outside, and he ends up having to sit before some sort of tribunal, Nuremberg style, and has to admit what he did, and then he goes to jail. Right. And that undermines not only the help that he did for Trump in the election and ongoing stuff over the next 2018, perhaps 2020 that he's planning, but also it opens all the windows on the money laundering and all that other stuff that's been going on, because Vladimir Putin has a salary somewhere in the area of like $140,000 US a year. The man is worth $200 billion. I mean, that in and of itself is extraordinary on twofold. A, the man has incredible saving skills. That's impressive. Or investment skills. But secondly, if that is like that house exchange with Trump in Florida, the most obvious example of an oligarch gutting his own country. And the fact that Trump looks at him not only as someone that he fears, clearly, that's holding something against him, but also that he would like to be like him. A lot of the Republicans, including the ones that are dropping out, are jealous of Vladimir Putin. Look at Saddam Hussein's, setup and go, man, it would be so much easier. You even had Bush 2 going, it'd be a whole lot easier if I was the dictator. That's been a thought form in the Republican side for quite a long time, that it would be a lot easier if we would just, and by the way, they're not alone in it. There are tons of people who identify as, as social justice warriors or what have you, who have an authoritarian streak, who they would love to set permanent rules on the level of jailing people for saying certain things or doing certain things. Period. That is a dictatorial thing. That's why they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. The problem is when these guys get close enough to it, when you're the leader of the free world, and you go, you know what, if we could just drop the word free, this would be a lot easier. I appreciate the call. Let me grab one more caller before we take the break. I can always count on him to either rail against immigrants or end up having us assassinate Putin. That's I understand where his heart is. His solutions need some work. It's a totally good thing, though. I mean, I get where he's coming. Okay.
Right. We have Mike.
Cool. Hey, Mike. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Go ahead.
You can hear me?
I can.
Okay. You just mentioned that the Russians are blackmailing Trump, or they got something on Trump. So it's evident, and all of us who are clear-eyed and clear-thinking, we can see this. The government knows this.
Right.
Now, the government also knows that they are blackmailing Trump and got something on Trump. They got something on the Republican leaders as well, because it just seems like it's not just being complicit about what is going on. It looks, from what I'm seeing, as them being a part of it.
Well, according to the Dallas Daily News, $7.6 million from a Russian oligarch went into the Republican coffers during the 2016 election cycle, and some of the top benefactors of that were Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't just stop with Donald Trump. But please continue. Yeah.
So when John McCain, the senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. When Lindsey Graham mentioned down in the bowels of the Congress building that we got to pass this tax bill, because if we don't, our donors are going to cut us off, and that will be the end of us.
Right.
So those donors are also Russian. because they have investments here in America and abroad.
Look at how much Russian money's coming in
So
through the
they're
NRA.
working for their American masters. They're working for their American masters and their Russian masters.
Mm-hmm.
So when is the American people, because 34, 35% of the people is not controlling the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The majority controls this. When are we going to wake up and say enough is enough?
I agree.
Thank you, Hal.
Absolutely. Appreciate the call. Again, this is something we've run up against, when you were, this argument kept coming up about the lesser of two evils, the lesser of two evils. Well, between a serial killer with a buck knife and a machine gun standing in front of you and a pickpocket, the pickpocket is the lesser of two evils. Which one are you going to get a ride home from? Because that's what you're talking about when you're talking about the lesser of two evils argument when it comes up. It is an insanely, it's infantile. It's a childish argument. And when you are presented with a lesser of two evils argument, not only do you have, I think, a responsibility to vote against the greater evil, even if it isn't to support the lesser of the two, that fighting against that greater evil and slowly but surely moving this country in the best direction that you possibly could, is a moral imperative. And if you're incapable of operating with that moral imperative, call yourself out on that. So we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. Happy birthday, Josh. I'm glad you like lab rats. Cool it. There. Hope you have a great birthday. There you go. Can't kill a mindset. You have to replace it. Okay. I do not normally swear, but if you let a disease fester, it will eventually kill you. Yeah, Eamon says it. I just think that a lot of times we think in political binaries and emotional binaries about this, and what happens is if you can get coaxed into overreacting emotionally, you can because you're not actually going to go through with it. It will eventually deflate. When's your Grey's Anatomy episode airing? I have no idea. I don't know what their arc is. Probably in the next couple months, though. I'll know. How do you think we can pull off a military-sanctioned election? No. I mean, that's a terrible way to go. That's a... newly restored Nazi film from Madison Square Garden meeting in 1930. It's not surprising. Yeah, it's no. Well, here's the thing: the Nazis were not the Nazis at that point. In a lot of ways, they weren't necessarily pushing in that direction. There was obviously some, a good majority of them were, German nationalists. Who, there's a lot of Germans in the country, and they were looking to support their country that
30
way.
30 seconds.
And then, it became what it became. But that's the problem with it. It's like looking at who was in the Koresh compound, in Waco at the beginning or throughout versus who died in the end and stuff. Manson family's another great example. It's not hard to grow this. Everybody has the capability of being awful. And dictators and people like Hitler knew this and they cultivate it.
I'm Dick Kay from Back on the Beat, and here is the mega worldwide radio program with Hal Sparks.
I love when he messes up my show name. It's so great. The wonderful Dick Kay, who will follow us today. Stick around for his show after this. I'm going to keep going with your calls. Who do we have next, Lady B?
We have Billy from the chat room.
Oh, right on, Billy. Excellent. Hey, Billy. Thank you for the super chat.
Hey, Hal, I was just here to. You are welcome. Just buy that building off in a hurry.
That's right.
I have come to calm the world down here because people are worrying about a constitutional crisis. Yeah, man, with Homeland Security chief meeting with the Russian spy chiefs and Russians in the Oval Office, Donald Trump making oodles of money over the Emoluments Clause, and Russian sanctions not voted on by majority league, and they're not being enforced at all. What's happening is Congress is protecting us from a constitutional crisis by doing absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is a running problem with the Republicans, is that there are two groups seemingly right now. There are the groups that keep their hands in their pockets and just stand there and act as if they have no responsibility or capability in this circumstance, and then there's the people who are actively running interference. It is. And the Jim Jordans of the world and the Mike Matthews of the world are driving this push. And McConnell and Ryan, all these guys are playing the normalizing game, and going, well, there's not much. I mean, the president will be the president. It goes to the immigration bill. So the immigration bill is it's going to hit the floor on Monday. According to the White House, a compromise bill that's been presented by Dick Durbin and his, I forget his Republican counterpart on the committee, but that has been presented.
John McCain.
Well, it will pass. It will pass the House and it will pass the Senate. The White House has said it's dead on arrival without his wall. That's the big thing. Unless they put the funding for the wall, he's not going to sign it. He's not going to veto it. I'm telling people, whatever they put in front of him, he will sign and hold up. He gets no benefit from not signing something. He doesn't. He too much enjoys the little trophy, participation ribbon of presidential politics, where he just holds up memorandums that he signed as if they're accomplished pieces of legislation, as if he got people to work together and create something that wasn't there to start with. The same thing is true with immigration. He's going to sign whatever they put in front of him. Period. It's absurd. So this idea that we won't know what we're going to have to hash through this, because what if we put together something great and the White House does it? No, he's going to sign whatever lands on his desk, because if he signs it, he thinks it's a win, even if it's if it's the worst bill ever. He thinks that if he signed it, that's an accomplishment. An accomplishment is getting something done. That's a win. That's a campaign promise kept, even if it's antithetical to his actual promise. Even if there's a 10 or 12-year path to citizenship for DACA members and their families, he's still going to consider it a win. And he is going to sign it. I don't care what anybody says. There is no way this man vetoes anything. It drives me nuts. It's stupid. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It was a bit of a rant, but yeah.
It's too late now. All you do is pull your string and you go. And one other thing I want to point out was that this stuff about the parade, this is actually an opportunity for Republicans to show that they were stately and worldly. No, we don't do this kind of thing here, which is trying to get them to look like they're looking good and being fine, when behind the scenes, everything that we don't need to happen for this country is going on, and they're supporting it right and left.
Mm-hmm.
From Susan Collins to Ted Cruz, no matter what they say, they're still voting with this guy.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Have a great one, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being such a valuable member of our chat room as well. Really appreciate it. And I'm glad you call in. I recommend, by the way, chat room, any of you guys who are in there, we should enforce a policy. Eventually, everybody that can eventually should try to call in at some point, just to 2 cents their way in, or at least just to pull my string, as Billy puts it. And thanks for pulling my string so ably, Billy. But yeah, this has been one of the kind of running arguments about the immigration debate and DACA, because currently, right now, Donald Trump's statement for the rescinding of DACA protections has been held up in court. It is effectively it's null and void currently, the March 5th deadline for what he had initially put in place is in limbo as well. And Monday, this, supposedly we're going to have this an old-fashioned floor bill, and and everybody's excited about them actually, offering amendments, creating. The Senate is actually going to go about the process of legislating. I think it was. Like one of the senators was saying, most of his, the people that are in the Senate with him right now have never actually even seen a floor vote, which is how this stuff used to be drafted in the first place. And so I think that's a good step forward. I'm glad that they're actually going to have this out in the open, because the problem the Republicans have and why they haven't wanted to do this beforehand is, quite frankly, that a lot of their voters and a lot of their Republican senators actually are on the side of a lot of this stuff on just reasonable governing grounds, but they can't do anything about it when the Freedom Caucasians are running the entire game, are stopping stuff, or unless you watch C-SPAN and watch the committee meetings throughout, or in the case of certain committee meetings that happen, off camera. Again, these are not these are not circumstances where the Republicans themselves, they're sort of trapped by their own minorities within their caucus, and it's just difficult for them to get. And it fits the same narrative that if this bill lands in front of Trump, he will sign it. If you do this bill making in public, Republicans and Democrats will get to see what their actual representation are doing with their tax dollars and with their efforts, and will actually, I think, move us forward as a country. This should happen more often. But it only happened because the Democrats effectively shut down the government a couple of weeks ago, and then held these elements as part of their conditions for getting it on the floor. Meanwhile, the DACA situation is in legal limbo anyways, which is the curious part of this entire conversation. Trump's tweet and rescinding of DACA protections is not standing up to legal scrutiny, because effectively these people have entered into a contract, and by coming out in the open, signing up for this, and the process of doing this is much like don't ask, don't tell. Once you got to the point where people have said who they are and that they're serving openly, this effectively happened with Trump's transgender ban in the military. Once you tell people, come out into the open, let us know who you are, sign up, follow the rules, do this kind of stuff, then we will allow you an opportunity to work towards citizenship or to stay here or whatever. And then you just bait them out into the open. This is, what it's like? It's like a little something that Republicans, like the one who was the anti-prostitution Republican who was just busted using taxpayer dollars to pay for the hotel that he was in with a prostitute, that they love to throw up whenever they're busted, called entrapment. There's the legal justification, or the contractually, it's much a better analogy, creating a contract that you never intended to follow through on. But in this case, it is baiting someone out, going, no, you can come out. It's fine. Nothing will happen to you. Please come out. And then they come out, and then you shoot them, essentially, or you arrest them, or you bait them into this kind of, visible criminality. And then you arrest them for it. And the Republicans always throw this one up, that these guys were entrapped. How could I pass on that? Is their argument. And it's curious to me that the Republicans are making primarily right now two legal arguments in almost everything facing them. One is this kind of idea of entrapment, that they're being baited into this. And this is what Trump's response to the memo was, that the Democratic memo is just a trap that he's supposed to fall in. He's going full, Admiral Akbar in this. And secondly, the other one is, you didn't have a right to search my trunk on probable cause. This is, the number of Republicans who think that they should be able to roll up on anybody, ask for their papers, look through their trunk and their personal effects. Everybody should have to submit to an instant search. Like, this is a Republican law and order kind of concept that's been around for a long time. This is like, why can't I look in your trunk? I hear thumping in the trunk. I think there's a person in there trying to get out. I'm going to, but the defense is you open the trunk, you heard, the cop heard the thumping, opened the trunk, and there were, children being kidnapped. And the lawyer for the guy driving the car says, you didn't have probable cause to pull me over in the first place, and the children in the trunk are fruit of the poison tree, and therefore the case of kidnapping has to get thrown out. Republicans in general, and I think most Americans, but especially the law and order, like Dirty Harry style Republicans that have been around since, the late 60s especially, would hate this stuff. They always rail against this. They think it's terrible. They're just basically pro shoot first, ask questions later. But when it comes to Trump, their argument to protect him about what was found in the wiretaps of Carter Page is that you never had the right to look in the first place because the guy who gave you the tip doesn't like Trump. It's absurd. We got to take a break. I got on a rant, and then I went in a minute into the break because I was mad, and that's what happens. We'll be back right after this. Be right back. I'm going to go kiss my kid. No, I don't. I think they're over by the bed, on the far side of the bed. You kicked them off last night. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, was I gone too long? Am I right? Hello? Could you add the phone number as one of your elements in the YouTube frame? People can see it on the YouTube app. Absolutely. That's a great idea. Now, how do I do it in here? Hold on. Let's see. Static text. I think that's how we do it. I think we have to put it here. We have to put it here. Oh, no, that's not it. I don't want that. And this. I'm looking. I'm trying to figure. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Cool.
You have 35 seconds and 3 more callers.
Wow. All right. That didn't work.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. Who do we have on the line, Lady B?
We have Bob from Palm Desert.
Excellent. Hey, Bob, welcome.
Hey, Hal. Wait a minute.
Yep. It's all right. You good? You all right? We're there. We're with you. Fear not.
I don't think so Rivera proposed a final solution to this problem, but this Russian cancer on the presidency with the Maddow show last Friday night, if you will, said that Saturday Night Massacre is set up like a bowling shot. So the resignation of Rachel Brandt, you know?
Yep.
The next West Wing guy, whose name escapes me, seems happy to constrict the Mueller investigation to just look around Mr. Trump. You think maybe Congress would get off its rear end and he would still be the presumptive W dictator, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Yeah, I do think there is a certain protection within it that Republicans will react and will protect the special counsel. That this may be a big act of faith on my part, but I do think that exists there. And like I said, the other aspect of this is that there is a limit to what these guys can do and still get elected on a national level. And anybody who wants, has national party desire will fight tooth and nail to make sure that this exists, because it basically, the minute they do this, this permanently sets up that Trump is now the defining human being in the history of the Republican Party forever and ever and ever. And right now, they'd rather him be a road bump that got them some stuff that they wanted and is basically forgettable as an a-hole that they blew off in many of the ways that they regard George W. Bush. We've forgotten, a ton of stuff that he's done horribly. And effectively, that just gave them a pass to get his tax breakthrough and Medicare Part D and all these other things that he did, including starting a war in the Middle East that they were for a very long time. All those elements are definitely part of, their plan. And as long as the president can carry out those things, they're fine with it. But they all had a limit on how far they would go with it. And ultimately, even Reagan had to sit down in front of Congress. I do think Trump will speak to Mueller. I think he will do it on tape in the private residence. But I do think it will come to that. And I think he might. The weird part will be if he tries to fire him before it happens, it's obvious and the reinstatement will happen faster. If he tries to do it after he's sat down with him, it will be even worse. That's why they're so agitated in this West Wing right now. And right now, all the people who would advise them on how to handle this in a lot of ways, literally, are being broomed from the White House. Like Rob Porter, they're not wrong that he did the job they wanted him to do, and he was very effective for them. But what he was effective at was being awful, right? So it really. I mean, they were glad that he's
such a bad influence.
Yeah, right. But again, who's influencing who? I mean, there's like a pecking order of abusers in that White House, and Trump currently views himself as the king because
Trump had a nickname for him.
Do you know what was it?
Nickname.
What was it?
Trump had a nickname.
Yeah, right. Well,
what was it, Beater or something like that?
Oh, right, yeah. Well,
I think that's terrible. I mean, you never do something like that if you're the same person.
Well, that's the thing.
Like Trump.
Well, here's the thing. I disagree vehemently with the idea that these guys are insane in any way, because they're not. They're sane. Trump is not mentally ill. He's stupid, foolhardy, and arrogant, but he's not this whole narcissistic personality disorder, or even the use, and I talk about this in my stand-up, I hate it, the use of phobia as an addendum to people's behavior. Understand this. Phobia is a mental illness. You're not responsible for your behavior when you're in the throes of a phobia. No one would say that someone who has a phobia of spiders is hateful when they jump up onto a chair at seeing one, right? That's part of a mental illness. So these people don't have mental, they're not homophobic or transphobic or Islamophobic. They're bigots. And we need to stop using these terms. And if you'll notice, there is no phobia word around black people or Jews, right? People are just racist or they're anti-Semitic, which means that there's a certain group of people who thinks that if you don't like Islam or you don't like gay people, you might have a mental illness, and that's what's making you afraid of them, and you're not in control. But if you don't like Jews or black people, somehow that's a reasonable conclusion to come from. I'm sorry. I don't buy that. It's not these people aren't phobic. They're not mentally ill.
Wage slavery caucus, you know, the freedom Caucasians, the wage slavery caucus, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to go away.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And those folks all have a premise that they're operating from, and as long as this president plays ball in that area, they will go along with anything he says, because all of his insults, his garbage, his undermining of military families and Gold Star families and women and all this stuff, they think that will go by the dustbin of history. But if they can get their tax breakthrough and keep all the Hispanics out, that will be worth it. They will take any bullet for this man for that reason. Yeah, totally. I appreciate the call. I'm going to try and grab another one. We have a bunch of people online. So yeah,
Great
absolutely.
Show,
thank you, brother. Okay, who else do we have, Lady B? I know I'm running out of time. This happens.
We have a Mike from St. Louis.
Yeah, whenever I get on a tear, we eat up all the time. Mike from St. Louis. Hi.
How you doing, Al?
Good.
Yeah, we always have a military parade every day. In fact, we have them all over the country. It's called Veterans Day.
Right.
So I would have a big Veterans Day parade for him over there, where you can go ahead and stand in front of all the people actually fought for this country.
I agree. Like, and the thing is, like, he was talking about Bastille Day, so there's some talk about doing this on the 4th of July. The idea behind this, though, is that he wants to sit there, like a military dictator with his Churchill face on, which is what he does when he pushes his bottom lip out, which is what is what Alec Baldwin seized on as part of the integral part of his impersonating him. And allegedly this is because Trump thinks when he pushes his bottom lip forward, it makes him look like Churchill and therefore, more like a leader. And he wants to sit there on those bleachers that, by the way, were empty on the day of his inauguration. And they want he wants this to finally have some full bleachers. And how's he going to get it? By hiding behind the military service of others. And you're absolutely right that it should be on Veterans Day. And here's the thing. Shouldn't be a parade on Veterans Day unless it's a kind of your generalized parade. Take the National Day of Service, for example, which would like MLK Day. That's what the Obamas really thought it should be about. And I agree. But if you're Trump, one of the things you can go, how about this? We're going to turn, instead of a parade, what I want is on Veterans Day, a National Day of Service for veterans. Veteran homelessness. You're going to go down and people are going to volunteer at soup kitchens or at homeless shelters where there are veterans there or whatever. Or work at the VA cleaning up the grounds. We're all going to go over there and fluff the pillows at the place. You know what I mean? Like, he could do that, but he's not going to. Because it's not about them, it's about him. Disgusting.
But that would be kind of funny watching all those people go by and see which ones that would salute him and which ones wouldn't salute him.
Oh, well, or what kind of salute they gave, how many fingers they actually used. But you bring up you bring up a really good point, because I had been operating under the premise for a while anyways that he was just going to sit and watch this parade. There's a very strong chance, now that you say that he would want to be in it at some point. Like, I don't rule that out, that they would deliver him in his car to some position at the head of it, and then he would get out and then go to the stands, and then they would all roll by him, and then he would finish out the thing with a car that would drive him around, or they'd take him off in Marine One at the end of it, and he'd fly over. yeah, I had always you got me. I had always operated on the premise that he would just be watching, and that it wouldn't be in fact a parade for him, which is entirely possible knowing this man. Wow. So there you go. But I hear.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've watched enough. I've listened to enough radio stations and everything like that. Nobody ever suggested that, so they ought to start pushing that one around a little bit and see if they get to the White House.
Dude, I think we actually came up with something. There's a bridge there. That's actually something you could work out with the Republicans and this White House and the American people, where you go, hey, tell you what, we'll do you a solid. We'll meet you halfway on this, and this is how it's going to go. Veterans Day and 4th of July are going to be days of service for our military vets. How about that? Either helping to end homelessness in vets.
Veterans Day only. That's all you need.
That's right, but I think you're right. I think Veterans Day would be a great day of service for our veterans.
Those people served. My son was a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
My father served in the military. My uncle served in the military.
Yeah.
I never had the chance to do it, but if I had to, I would have done it.
Right.
I've done it proudly because I want to go ahead and see this country be the best country it can be, not only for the 1%, but for everybody.
Right.
I keep trying to talk to my friends that are basically strong Republicans, and all it ends up going back to Hillary's emails. But the thing is, there are common ground things you can't talk to them about them. Taking money out of politics, things like that. But for the most part, they are a stubborn son of a bucks.
Well, I think, again, it's all about what the trade is. What are you going to trade? What do they think they're getting out of this that would make the other side of it worth anything? And to them, a lot of service for people who are outside their realm of existence, it's not real to them at all. But what's real to them is Mexicans stealing their jobs, or if I ever become rich, the poor are going to want to take it from me. And that's something a lot of people can wrap their head around easily, and because it's a simple thought that locks in there. It's like an idea virus. And convincing them otherwise is really tough. I appreciate the call a lot. We got to take a break. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT820.com, and, of course, on TuneIn. There we go. All right. Oh, my God, Carl, that video of Trump with his hair. Ugh. Oh, it was brutal. I love it. Like on Snopes, they actually had to cover the "Is Trump's hair blowing in the wind" thing, and it's hysterical because they were like, it's just a solid true. There's almost no explanation on Snopes. All right. And watch, I just got that graphic up, and then we're going to get a ton of calls, and I have one segment left. That's how we think Trump should have been on Falcon Heavy driving the car. I wouldn't know, because what if aliens come in contact with us, and that he's the first person they meet? They'll destroy the planet. I think it's very dangerous. Okay, there's got to be a desktop.
You got 50 seconds, and you have one more caller, John from Hammond, Indiana.
Okay, great. Excellent. Hammond, Indiana, Hammond, Indiana, Hammond, Indiana. All right. Right. This has got to be in here somewhere. Perhaps it's over here. Video, media playlist, screen capture. That's what it is. Let's see. Include mouse cursor. No. Capture area, custom, show capture area, right there. Move this over here, move that over there. Ooh, this is going to be rough. Check. Cool. Right, capture area. There we go. Put this over here. And then
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
Welcome back. We got one more caller on the line. Who do you have, Lady B?
John from Hammond.
Excellent. Hey, John, welcome.
How you doing?
Hey,
I mean, we need to fix the Electoral College. Let's get down to it.
Sure.
You know? Hillary won by so many million votes. We got to fix this damn thing, because before we point the finger at anybody else, we got to deal with our own democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And just one quick point that I told your screener. I recently met 2 ex-soldiers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One about 5 years ago and one just this week. And I start talking to these guys, and they're saying, yeah, well, you know, we're out here defending capitalism. And I was like, what? Whoa, what? You know, and one guy says to me, he says, oh, yeah, you know, well, greed is good. And I go, greed is evil. Capitalism, I said, we defend democracy. They are indoctrinating soldiers now that they're fighting for capitalism. For God's sakes, we're not fighting for capitalism. We're fighting for democracy, liberty, justice, you know, the Constitution. So we got the entire military is being indoctrinated. So next generations they got the wrong. This is the thing that's going on with this brainwashing that's going on out there. I don't know if you're seeing this.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's.
But anyway, just.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just that they think that it's capitalism. Well, if that's the case, and I work at a steel mill, okay, and we got good jobs, and this guy's telling me he's defending capital. I go, if that's the case, all right, open up the floodgates and let communist China send all their freaking steel in here. We will all be working at McDonald's, okay? We won't have a decent job and decent wages and a decent standard of living around here. You know, you're not defending I'm not working for the communists in China. I'm working for democracy and what made this country great. And
yeah, well, I think you're right about. There's a big sticking point with the descriptive is that they think the alternative to communism is capitalism. That they, and in many ways, you'll see this all over the right wing's YouTube and their media arms or whatever, is that what they think they're fighting is Maoism and Marxism hidden in schools and in organizations throughout the country, and that there's this sort of subtle, in socialism, there is a subtle hint of communist and Marxist conspiratorialness. That's eventually how it's going to take over. Instead of just understanding that capitalism as an economic standard in its pure form does not work, no more than communism in its pure form works. And what happens is when you have communism, you end up with black markets. You end up with people buying jeans on the street and buying, you know, rock and roll cassette tapes of bands they're not allowed to see and stuff like that. And that balances out the system and makes it artificially inflate and work for a little while. In capitalism, we recognize that while capitalism is a sort of a natural hierarchical standard that a lot of people operate in, and it comes very naturally to people. It doesn't work unless you have some sort of a safety net as well. It becomes this Darwinian monstrosity. And so socialism and social programs effectively become the sort of equivalent of those black market systems in communist systems. They are the balancing act that without that you cannot have a healthy capitalist structure without a social safety net. Otherwise, you don't have any kind of a society. You don't, and that's why capitalism is an economic standard, not a social standard, and certainly not a governing standard. Right. And libertarians think it's a governing standard, and the right has been, over the years, eaten up by the libertarian, feudalists who believe in this sort of like they believe that they're the Darwinian peak of humanity. They believe that that racial and ethnic and cultural groups are intrinsically behaviorally a certain way. They're not civic nationalists, which is what America has been known for forever. Civic nationalists believing that it's the nature of this country that makes everybody here an American, not their bloodline, and that's really a rough one for them. And there's ground to be made with Democrats and people about going, if you come here, you want to participate in a constitutional democracy. And if you don't want to participate in a constitutional democracy, there are other countries you'll be quite happy in. And the irony is that a lot of the white nationalists qualify as extraneous human beings to the U.S. constitutional system. They don't believe in it. They believe that there should be sort of a white dictatorial system. And that's, by the way, that's not only not democracy, it's also not capitalism. There's no such thing as a capitalist dictatorship. That is oligarchical control over the monetary system. It always has been.
Right.
And they live in this weird fantasy where they can have these ignorance pockets in their thought forms that somehow set them loose from having to actually defend the United States Constitution as it stands. These guys, more and more, year after year, it points to that they have real problems with the Constitution on its face, and especially things that create levels of racial equality. For all the talk about the Founding Fathers being slaveholders and it being an imbalanced system or whatever, they were aware of the imperfections of their current system, and they built something that could lead to a more perfect union. That was the whole purpose. They knew they weren't there yet. They knew where they needed to head to, and half of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that were not slaveholders, they eventually created an imbalance that led to what would be the Civil War and would eventually become racial and gender equality in this country. They knew it, and that's what they were shooting for. That was the basis of the Enlightenment, that you didn't have to be born from a bloodline to actually have worth in the world. That was exactly the root of all this, and it is now currently driving this Republican Party mad. They don't understand it. And they think that Donald Trump is the pinnacle of genetic supremacy. Listen to the man. I have the best brain, my good genes. I've got great genes. It's bananas. And these used to be the people who cared about law and order, and they used to care about our Constitution. And now they're like, you didn't have a warrant to look in my trunk, no matter how many Russians you found in there. And you did, and I don't care if the law says we have to treat people equally. If I want to not treat them equally, I should have protections so that I don't have to. It is stunning where they have, where their logic has followed them. And you're absolutely right that this sort of teaching that capitalism is more than an economic theory. It is effectively a form of social Darwinian thought the last time that played out, we ended up with Hitler. That once you start using, Darwinism as your choice point for who lives and who dies and who has worth in a system, that's a really slippery slope to a very ugly place. And there's a lot of winks and nods about that on the right's YouTube channels and on places like Tucker Carlson's, The Daily Caller and stuff. You watch the way that they're going, it's pretty angry and pretty ugly, and it goes there pretty quickly. And you're right. The soldiers need to be, reminded, I think, regularly that flag that they salute and with pride represents the freedom of every American, whether you like them or not. And the left needs to be reminded of that sometimes too. We all do. We all need to be reminded that we're fighting for the rights of people we may not even like. But that's what makes America awesome. That is literally the root of why America is a great country. And why the cheaper, easier road of exclusion and hatred it can so easily take over if we let it. The creation of this democracy and the creation of this country was a lot of hard work, and the active choice to destroy it, either with this kind of cover your face Molotov cocktail attitude that supposedly Antifa has, and bring out the whole system's rotten, so bring it down, or Putin from the outside saying we can suffocate democracy and no one will have a recourse in the future. They're the same illness. We have a responsibility that we were given a gift in this democracy, and the world over.